Long before fire became dependable, warmth did not come from flames. It came from fear, from bodies pressed together in darkness, from animal skins that still carried the smell of death, from caves that trapped breath and smoke and sickness at the same time. Early humans survived cold nights not because they mastered nature, but because they learned how little heat a human body could lose before life quietly disappeared. A single windy night could erase an entire group before morning. And for thousands of years, even after humans discovered fire, they still could not trust it. Rain killed it, wind scattered it, wet wood refused it. Entire migrations happened without reliable flame, which means some of the most important changes in the human body, in sleep, in social closeness, and even in the shape of human shelters may have happened during a time when warmth itself could vanish before dawn. If fire was uncertain for so long, what exactly kept ancient humans alive through the coldest nights on Earth? For most of human history, fire was not a tool waiting beside a wall or hidden inside a small metal lighter. It was an accident, a rare event, something people discovered more often than they created. Long before reliable fire-making methods existed, ancient humans lived in a world where warmth could disappear without warning. A group might carry burning branches from a distant wildfire for days, protecting weak embers through wind and rain, only to lose everything during one cold night. Once the flame died, there was often no quick way to bring it back. The dark returned immediately. So did the cold. Archaeologists believe early humans were using natural fire hundreds of thousands of years before they consistently learned how to produce it themselves. Evidence from ancient sites suggests that some groups could preserve fire, but not necessarily create it whenever they wanted. This distinction mattered deeply. Knowing that fire existed was not enough. Survival depended on whether warmth could still be present after sunset, after storms, after long migrations across unfamiliar land. In colder regions, this uncertainty shaped nearly every part of life. A human body loses heat steadily into open air, especially during sleep. Wind removes warmth faster. Wet ground pulls heat away through contact. Even breathing cold air forces the body to spend energy simply to stay alive. Modern homes hide most of these dangers behind insulation, dry clothing, and controlled temperatures. Ancient humans had none of these protections for most of prehistory. Night was not only dark, it was physically draining. During the Ice Age periods, temperatures in some inhabited regions dropped far below freezing for long stretches of the year. Yet humans continued moving into these environments. This does not mean they were comfortable there, it means they found temporary ways to endure. Anthropologists, studying hunter-gatherer survival patterns, have noted that mobility itself became a form of warmth management. Groups often moved according to season, wind exposure, access to animal hides, and the availability of sheltered terrain. Fire helped when it survived, but people could not build an entire existence around something so fragile. Rain alone could erase hours of effort. Damp wood created smoke without much heat. Strong winds scattered sparks into darkness. Even carrying embers required constant attention. Some researchers believe ancient groups may have transported smoldering materials like fungus, bark, or dried dung to preserve heat over distance. These materials could hold slow-burning embers for hours if protected carefully. But carrying fire this way was exhausting and uncertain. One mistake during travel could leave an entire group without warmth by nightfall. This fragile relationship with fire may explain why early humans developed many other methods of conserving heat long before reliable flames became common. Thick animal skins, tightly shared sleeping spaces, wind-blocking shelters, and carefully chosen resting places all appeared not as secondary comforts, but as essential protections against heat loss. Fire was important, but it was not always the center of survival yet. In many ways, the human body itself remained the primary source of warmth. The cold shaped where people rested, how closely they slept, how long they stayed awake, and which landscapes felt survivable. Ancient humans were not living beside perfect campfires every night. Many nights were quiet, dim, and dangerously cold, with only fading embers glowing weakly against the dark. Even after ancient humans learned that fire could provide warmth, light, and protection, keeping it alive remained difficult for an extremely long time. Modern people often imagine prehistoric fires as steady campfires burning every evening without interruption. But in reality, ancient fire was fragile. It depended on weather, fuel, moisture, wind, and constant human attention. A single mistake could return an entire group to darkness before morning. Early humans did not have dry matches, controlled fuel, or waterproof containers. Most natural landscapes became cold and damp after sunset. Wood absorbed moisture from rain, snow, fog, and even night air itself. Damp wood can produce thick smoke while releasing very little heat. In some environments, especially during colder Ice Age climates, finding dry fuel may have taken hours each day. Small branches burned quickly, larger wood was heavy to carry, rotten wood crumbled apart before producing lasting heat. Even when fire started successfully, maintaining it through the night required labor. Someone often needed to wake repeatedly to move wood, protect embers, or keep wind from extinguishing weak flames. Archaeological evidence from some prehistoric hearths suggests that fires were not always large or stable. Many appear to have burned at relatively low temperatures, perhaps because fuel was limited or difficult to sustain. In open environments, such as grasslands or tundra, strong wind could scatter sparks and ash within minutes. Fire behaves unpredictably outdoors. A sheltered flame might survive calmly for hours, then suddenly weaken once air currents change direction. Ancient people likely understood these patterns closely because their survival depended on reading them. But understanding nature does not guarantee control over it. During migration, fire became even more difficult to preserve. Hunter-gatherer groups often traveled long distances following animals, water, or seasonal changes. Carrying active flames during movement was dangerous and exhausting. Embers had to be protected from rain and sudden gusts, while remaining supplied with enough oxygen to stay alive. Some scientists believe people carried smoldering materials inside bark containers, shells, or wrapped bundles of slow-burning plant matter. Others suggest dried animal dung or fungus may have helped preserve heat during travel, because these materials can burn slowly for extended periods. But none of these methods were reliable in every condition. A river crossing, a storm, or simple exhaustion could end the effort completely. Recreating fire after losing it may have been impossible for many groups during certain periods of prehistory. Reliable fire-making technologies, such as friction drills or controlled striking methods, developed gradually over enormous spans of time. Evidence suggests that consistent fire production likely appeared much later than simple fire use. This meant some ancient communities may have depended heavily on maintaining existing flames rather than creating new ones freely. Fire was treated almost like something alive. It needed feeding, shelter, and protection. Letting it die may have carried emotional weight alongside practical danger. In colder regions especially, losing fire meant more than discomfort. Human sleep changes rapidly in low temperatures, fingers stiffen, muscles tense. Breathing cold air through the night increases physical stress on the body. Children and older adults face even greater danger because they lose heat more quickly. Without dependable warmth, nighttime became a period of energy conservation rather than true rest. Ancient humans may have structured entire evening routines around protecting small amounts of heat from disappearing. This uncertainty helps explain why early shelters were often designed less for comfort and more for reducing wind exposure. It also explains why humans stayed physically close together while resting. Fire was powerful, but for much of prehistory it was unstable enough that the human body itself still remained the most dependable source of warmth. There were nights in prehistoric life when humans probably understood before sunset that they would not stay warm until morning. The air itself could reveal it. Strong wind arriving from open land, wet ground after freezing rain, heavy clouds trapping moisture close to the earth. A weak fire already shrinking too early in the evening. Ancient humans lived close enough to nature to recognize small environmental changes immediately, because small changes often decided whether sleep would be possible at all. Cold affects the body slowly at first. Fingers lose flexibility, the jaw tightens, muscles begin producing small involuntary movements to create heat. Modern people call this shivering, but in ancient environments it was more than discomfort. It was one of the body's oldest emergency systems. Human bodies burn energy continuously to maintain internal temperature. During freezing nights without dependable fire, staying alive required the body to spend precious calories even while lying still. This mattered deeply for hunter-gatherer groups because food was never guaranteed. A cold night after a poor hunt forced the body into competing needs. Energy had to support warmth, movement, healing, and brain function at the same time. Children face the greatest danger. Smaller bodies lose heat faster because they contain less mass relative to surface area. Elderly individuals likely suffered similarly. Anthropologists studying modern cold exposure note that exhaustion and reduced awareness often arrive before severe hypothermia. This means ancient humans may not always have experienced cold as sharp pain. Sometimes it became silence, slowing movement, and growing sleepiness. In darkness, this could be difficult to distinguish from ordinary fatigue. Reliable fire would eventually help reduce these dangers, but during much of prehistory, humans still faced long nights where warmth depended mostly on conserving body heat carefully. Sleep itself became complicated in cold environments. Deep sleep lowers awareness and reduces movement, which also reduces heat production. A sleeping person becomes vulnerable more quickly than an awake one. Some researchers believe ancient humans may have slept in shorter intervals during dangerous conditions, waking frequently to adjust position, add material to weak fires, or move closer together. Even slight changes in sleeping posture matter during cold exposure. Curling inward protects heat by reducing exposed surface area. Many mammals use this same behavior naturally. Ancient humans likely did the same without conscious thought. Archaeological evidence from prehistoric shelters shows repeated use of confined sleeping spaces rather than large open areas. This may reflect warmth preservation as much as protection from predators. Narrow spaces trap body heat more effectively. Wind becomes easier to block. Shared warmth lasts longer. In some cases, the simple act of sleeping close together may have provided more reliable heat than unstable flames nearby. Animal skins also played an important role, though likely far less comfortably than modern blankets. Fresh hides could remain damp, heavy, and stiff in cold conditions. Without advanced tanning methods, many skins carried odors, moisture, and parasites. Yet, they still trapped air effectively, slowing heat loss from the body. Ancient humans probably understood through experience which furs insulated best when wet, which dried fastest, and which remained useful during long migrations. None of these methods created true comfort. They created survival margins, just enough warmth to reach another sunrise. This is important to remember when imagining prehistoric nights. Ancient humans were not sitting peacefully beside perfect fires under clear skies every evening. Many nights were physically tense and uncertain. Wind entered shelters through small gaps. Embers faded unexpectedly. Wet hides cooled against the skin. The darkness beyond the sleeping group remained cold and almost endless. Fire existed, but it had not yet freed humans from the constant labor of staying warm. Before ancient humans could depend on fire, the most reliable source of warmth was the human body itself. Every person carried a small supply of heat continuously generated from inside. The brain, heart, liver, and muscles all produce warmth simply by staying alive. Even during rest, the human body releases heat into the surrounding air. Modern life hides this process beneath layers of insulation and controlled temperatures. But in prehistoric environments, body heat became something visible and valuable. A sleeping person could feel warmth, leaving another person's skin nearby. In freezing air, even breath became noticeable, appearing in pale clouds during the night. Human survival often depended on slowing the escape of this heat for as long as possible. The body constantly tries to maintain an internal temperature close to 37 degrees Celsius. When cold air surrounds the skin, blood vessels near the surface begin narrowing. This process, called vasoconstriction, reduces blood flow to the hands, feet, and outer skin in order to protect vital organs deeper inside the body. Ancient humans did not know these biological terms, but they understood the experience clearly. Fingers became numb first, toes stiffened, The nose and ears lost warmth quickly. Meanwhile, the chest and abdomen stayed warmer because the body was protecting the organs necessary for survival. This automatic system allowed humans to endure cold environments longer than many animals without thick fur, but it also came with limits. If heat loss continued too long, the body eventually struggled to maintain balance. Muscles then began producing involuntary contractions known as shivering. Shivering is not random movement, it is an emergency heat-making system. Small, rapid muscle contractions generate warmth through physical activity, even while the body remains mostly still. This process consumes large amounts of energy. During prehistoric winters or long, cold nights, repeated shivering could leave people exhausted by morning even if they had barely moved. Food, therefore, became connected directly to warmth. A well-fed body produces heat more effectively than a starving one. Anthropologists studying modern cold-weather populations have observed that calorie intake rises sharply in freezing environments because maintaining body temperature requires constant energy. Ancient humans likely experienced the same pressure. Hunting failures during cold seasons were dangerous not only because of hunger, but because weaker bodies struggled to stay warm through the night. Fat on the human body also mattered more than many people realize today. Body fat acts as insulation, slowing heat loss slightly and storing energy for emergencies. In colder climates, survival often favored people who could conserve energy carefully and retain body warmth efficiently. Scientists have even suggested that some ancient human populations developed physical adaptations related partly to climate, including differences in body shape that reduced exposed surface area in colder regions. Shorter limbs and broader bodies lose heat more slowly than tall, narrow forms. These gradual adaptations happened over immense periods of time as humans spread into harsher environments. But biological adaptation alone was never enough. The body could generate warmth, yet it could not create endless heat against freezing air without support. Ancient humans learned to work with their bodies carefully. Movement before sleep may have helped raise warmth temporarily. Curling inward reduced exposed skin. Resting on dry plant material slowed heat transfer into cold ground. Sleeping near others allowed multiple bodies to share trapped warmth inside small, sheltered spaces. In many ways, prehistoric survival depended less on defeating the cold and more on understanding how slowly heat leaves the body. Long before reliable fire transformed human nights, warmth remained something fragile and temporary, carried quietly beneath the skin itself. Long before blankets, insulated walls, or reliable fires, ancient humans discovered one of the simplest ways to survive cold nights. They slept close together. In modern life, personal space often feels natural and permanent, especially during sleep. But for most of human history, distance between bodies at night meant lost heat. Warmth escaped quickly into cold air, and every small source of retained heat mattered. A single human body produces only a modest amount of warmth, but several bodies gathered tightly inside a sheltered space can create a noticeably warmer environment. This principle is still visible in many animals today. Penguins huddle during Antarctic storms. Rodents sleep in groups during winter. Even large mammals reduce heat loss by resting close together. Ancient humans likely relied on the same biological logic long before they understood it scientifically. Archaeologists cannot directly observe prehistoric sleeping arrangements, but evidence from ancient shelters suggests many resting spaces were small and tightly organized. In caves, rock overhangs, and early constructed shelters, usable sleeping areas were often confined rather than spread widely apart. Small, enclosed spaces trap warmth more efficiently because less air circulates freely. Body heat slowly accumulates inside enclosed shelters, especially when entrances are partially blocked against wind. In freezing conditions, even a slight increase in temperature could reduce the body's energy loss during sleep. Ancient humans may have arranged themselves carefully through the night, with children positioned near adults and weaker individuals placed toward warmer central areas. This pattern still appears in some traditional cold-weather communities where communal sleeping reduces exposure risk. Sleeping close together also changes how the body responds to cold physiologically. Skin detects nearby warmth immediately. Shared body heat can reduce the intensity of shivering and lower the energy required to maintain core temperature. During periods of food scarcity, conserving calories became extremely important. Every bit of preserved energy increased the chance of surviving the next day's hunt, migration, or storm. Anthropologists studying modern survival situations have repeatedly noted that human contact remains one of the fastest ways to reduce dangerous heat loss when external warmth is unavailable. Yet prehistoric communal sleeping was probably not peaceful in the modern sense. Crowded shelters carried discomforts and risks of their own. Bodies shifted constantly during sleep. Breathing air inside enclosed spaces became humid and stale. Illness could spread more easily in close quarters. Parasites likely moved rapidly through animal skins and shared bedding materials. Infants cried. Smoke from weak fires irritated the lungs and eyes. Large predators outside may have forced groups to remain silent and tightly packed for safety. Ancient nights were not quiet moments of comfort beside glowing flames. They were often tense periods of endurance where warmth, safety, and exhaustion all competed at once. Human social behavior may have been shaped deeply by these shared nights. Physical closeness during sleep likely strengthened emotional bonds inside small groups because survival depended directly on cooperation. A person separated from the group faced much greater danger from cold exposure alone. This reality may help explain why humans developed unusually strong social attachment compared to many species. In prehistoric environments, warmth itself became social. To sleep near others was not simply emotional companionship, it was protection against losing body heat faster than it could be replaced. Even today, humans instinctively pull closer together during cold weather without needing instruction. Parents wrap children close to the chest. Families gather in shared spaces during storms. Blankets are pulled over more than one person at a time. These behaviors may carry echoes of a much older world, where the warmth of nearby bodies often mattered more than fire itself. Before reliable flames transformed human nights, survival sometimes depended on something quieter and simpler. Not conquering the cold, but enduring it together until morning arrived. One of the oldest survival systems inside the human body begins almost silently. A slight tightening in the jaw, small movements in the shoulders, fingers trembling without permission. Long before ancient humans understood cold scientifically, their bodies were already responding to it automatically. Shivering is one of the body's deepest protective reflexes, shared across many warm-blooded animals. It appears simple from the outside, but underneath the skin, it is a carefully coordinated attempt to create heat when warmth is disappearing too quickly. Muscles generate heat whenever they contract. During ordinary movement, most of this heat is only a byproduct of activity. But during cold exposure, the brain can trigger rapid involuntary muscle contractions specifically for warmth production. These tiny repeated movements consume stored energy and convert it into heat, helping protect the body's internal temperature. Ancient humans likely spent enormous portions of winter nights in some stage of this process, especially before dependable fire became common. Shivering often begins before a person fully realizes how cold they are. The nervous system detects falling skin temperature and signals muscles to respond automatically. This reaction may have been especially important during sleep, when awareness decreases and the body becomes less active. Without movement, heat production drops. A sleeping body, therefore, becomes more vulnerable to cold air, damp ground, and wind exposure. In prehistoric environments, shivering during the night may have been extremely common, especially among groups living in colder climates or during seasonal migrations. But shivering has limits. It requires energy, and energy comes from food. A starving body cannot sustain strong heat production indefinitely. Anthropologists and physiologists studying cold exposure have found that exhaustion, dehydration, and low-calorie intake all reduce the body's ability to maintain temperature. For ancient humans, this created a dangerous cycle during harsh seasons. Cold increased the need for food, but winter often reduced food availability at the same time. Weakness made warmth harder to preserve. Poor sleep weakened hunting ability. Failed hunts then made the following night even colder. The body fought continuously to stay balanced. Ancient humans probably understood this relationship through experience rather than theory. After long periods without adequate food, cold likely felt heavier and more difficult to resist. Shivering also interferes with rest itself. The body cannot fully relax while muscles repeatedly contract. Sleep becomes fragmented. The nervous system remains partially alert. Modern studies of people exposed to cold environments show increased nighttime waking and reduced deep sleep. Ancient nights may therefore have been filled with small interruptions that people gradually adapted to over generations. A person might wake briefly to curl tighter beneath animal skins, move closer to another body, or shield exposed hands from cold air before drifting back into lighter sleep. Even today, humans naturally pull limbs inward during cold nights without conscious thought. These behaviors are ancient biological responses shaped long before insulated homes existed. There is another quiet detail about shivering that mattered deeply in prehistoric life. It produces sound, teeth chatter, breathing changes rhythm. Animal skins rustle as muscles tense beneath them. In open wilderness, noise could attract attention from predators or rival groups. Ancient humans living without secure shelters may have faced a strange conflict between staying warm and remaining unnoticed. Complete stillness conserved silence, but movement generated heat. The body itself became trapped between survival needs. Over time, humans developed many ways to reduce the need for constant shivering. Shared sleeping, thicker coverings, protected shelters, and eventually more dependable fire all lowered heat loss before the body entered emergency response. But for thousands upon thousands of years, much of human warmth still came from within. Not from comfort, not from technology, but from muscles quietly trembling in darkness while the cold pressed against the outside world. Long before woven fabric, insulated coats, or carefully stitched winter clothing, ancient humans survived cold weather by covering themselves with the bodies of other animals. Animal skins became one of the earliest and most important forms of protection against heat loss. In freezing environments, the fur that once kept an animal alive could continue serving the same purpose after death. This may seem simple now, but for prehistoric humans, it represented a profound understanding of survival. They observed that certain animals remained active during cold seasons, while humans struggled against exposure. Fur trapped warmth, thick hides blocked wind, fat beneath the skin slowed the escape of heat. Over time, humans began carrying these protective layers onto their own bodies. Archaeological evidence suggests that the use of animal hides became increasingly important as humans moved into colder regions of Europe and Asia. Some of these migrations occurred during Ice Age conditions, when temperatures and wind exposure would have made bare skin extremely dangerous. Human bodies alone could not tolerate such environments for long periods without additional insulation. Unlike many mammals, humans possess relatively little body hair. Sweat-based cooling systems helped early humans survive heat and endurance hunting, but this same biology created vulnerability in freezing climates. Animal skins helped compensate for this weakness. Yet prehistoric hides were not comfortable in the modern sense. Fresh animal skin changes rapidly after death. Without proper preparation, it stiffens, decays, and retains moisture. Early humans likely wore hides long before advanced tanning methods existed. This means many coverings were probably heavy, damp, smoky, and unpleasant to smell. Blood, fat, and bits of tissue may have remained attached during short-term use. In cold weather, wet skin pressed against the human body could become dangerous if temperatures dropped further overnight. Ancient people had to learn gradually which hides worked best and how to preserve them longer. Some furs trapped heat extremely well because dense layers of hair held pockets of still air close to the body. Air itself becomes insulation when movement is limited. This principle still explains modern winter clothing today. Thick fur from cold-adapted animals such as reindeer, bison, wolves, or mammoths may have offered critical protection in Ice Age environments. Researchers studying traditional cold-weather societies have found that certain animal furs remain effective even under snow and freezing wind because the layered hairs reduce airflow near the skin. Ancient humans likely learned through direct experience which materials stayed warm when damp, which became too heavy during rain, and which cracked apart after repeated freezing. Animal fat also mattered greatly. Fat trapped inside hides could improve wind resistance and reduce water penetration slightly. Some groups may have intentionally rubbed additional grease or fat into skins for preservation and insulation. Smoke from fires may have helped dry hides and slow decay as well. But none of these processes happened instantly. Preparing useful coverings required time, labor, and knowledge passed through generations. A successful hunt provided not only food, but warmth for future nights. This changed the meaning of animals in prehistoric life. They became shelter, insulation, and survival itself. Wearing animal skins also affected movement and sleep. Thick hides restricted flexibility but protected resting bodies from cold air and frozen ground. During sleep, humans may have wrapped themselves in layered skins, much like nesting animals. Some archaeological sites preserve evidence of repeated hide use inside shelters, suggesting that sleeping areas were carefully insulated using available animal materials. Before dependable fire became common, these coverings may have mattered more than flames during long winter nights. Ancient humans survived not by defeating the cold completely, but by borrowing warmth from creatures already adapted to it. Ancient humans did not survive cold climates because animal skins created heat. They survived because fur and fat slowed the loss of heat already produced by the body. This difference mattered enormously. In freezing environments, warmth disappears continuously into surrounding air, wind, water, and ground. The body is always losing energy. Animal coverings worked by delaying that loss long enough for a person to survive the night. Long before humans understood insulation scientifically, they learned that certain materials held warmth better than others. Thick winter fur from cold-adapted animals became one of the most valuable resources in prehistoric life. Fur works because of air. Dense layers of hair trap countless tiny pockets of still air close to the skin. Moving air removes heat rapidly, but trapped air slows this process. This is why animals living in cold climates often appear larger or thicker during winter months. Their coats are not simply decorative layers, they are carefully evolved insulation systems. Ancient humans gradually began using these systems themselves. Archaeologists and anthropologists studying Ice Age survival believe that animal fur likely played a major role in allowing humans to move into extremely cold regions where bare human skin alone could not survive for long. Some animal hides worked far better than others. Reindeer fur, for example, contains hollow hairs that trap additional air and improve insulation. Arctic animals often possess layered coats with both dense underfur and longer outer hairs that block wind and moisture. Humans living near these animals may have learned through observation and repeated experience which furs stayed warm during snow, which became dangerously heavy when wet, and which lost effectiveness after repeated freezing. This knowledge probably spread slowly across generations, becoming part of survival itself. Fat was equally important, though less visible. Many cold-adapted animals carry thick layers of fat beneath the skin because fat slows heat transfer and stores large amounts of energy. Ancient humans depended heavily on animal fat not only as food, but also as a material connected to warmth. Fat could be rubbed into hides to reduce water absorption and improve flexibility. Grease may have helped protect exposed skin from freezing wind. Some prehistoric groups likely valued fatty animals, especially highly during winter, because lean meat alone could not support long-term survival in harsh, cold environments. Anthropologists studying northern hunting cultures have repeatedly noted that animal fat becomes critically important during freezing seasons when the body burns enormous amounts of energy simply maintaining heat. Human body fat also interacts with external insulation. A well-insulated person loses warmth more slowly because layers of fur reduce exposure to moving cold air. But if insulation becomes wet, conditions change quickly. Water conducts heat away from the body far faster than dry air. Snow itself can sometimes insulate surprisingly well because trapped air exists between snow crystals, but melting snow and freezing rain create much greater danger. Ancient humans probably spent large amounts of time drying hides, adjusting coverings, and protecting sleeping materials from moisture. Wet fur at night could become deadly. During sleep, layers of animal skins may have functioned almost like portable shelters. Thick furs beneath the body reduced heat loss into frozen ground, while additional layers above trapped rising warmth from breath and skin. In small, enclosed sleeping spaces, several bodies wrapped in overlapping hides could slowly warm the surrounding air enough to reduce shivering and conserve energy. These conditions were still uncomfortable by modern standards, but they created narrow survival margins where none would otherwise exist. Before dependable fire transformed human nights, prehistoric warmth came mostly from understanding how to trap heat, not create it. Fur slowed the wind, fat resisted cold, air hidden inside animal coats became invisible protection against freezing darkness. Ancient humans survived partly because they learned to borrow the insulation strategies that nature had already spent millions of years perfecting. Modern winter clothing is dry, flexible, and designed to feel comfortable against the skin. Ancient animal hides were nothing like this. For prehistoric humans, warmth often came wrapped inside heavy materials that smelled of smoke, blood, damp earth, and the animals they once belonged to. Survival rarely felt clean. Before advanced tanning methods existed, animal skins changed constantly with weather and time. A hide might feel soft near a fire for one evening, then stiffen into a heavy frozen sheet by morning if moisture entered the fibers overnight. Ancient humans wore these materials anyway because the alternative was losing body heat directly into cold air. The weight of survival was often literal. Fresh hides carried water easily. Rain, melting snow, and condensation from human breath could soak into fur and skin during long nights inside enclosed shelters. Wet hides became heavier, slower to dry, and more difficult to carry during migration. Some large furs from Ice Age animals may have weighed many kilograms even before absorbing moisture. Moving through snow or rough terrain while wrapped in thick animal coverings required constant physical effort, yet removing them exposed the body immediately to freezing wind. Ancient humans lived within this uncomfortable balance for thousands of years. Smell was another unavoidable part of prehistoric warmth. Untreated animal skins retain oils, tissue, and organic residue that gradually decay. Smoke from weak fires may have reduced some odors and slowed decomposition slightly, but many hides likely carried strong scents continuously. Modern studies of traditional hide preparation show that, without thorough processing, animal skins attract insects, absorb sweat, and develop bacteria rapidly. Ancient sleeping spaces were probably filled with overlapping smells from smoke, fur, damp earth, bodies, and stored food. These conditions may seem unpleasant today, but prehistoric humans likely experienced them as ordinary parts of survival. Smell itself may even have carried useful information. A person could notice whether a hide remained damp, whether mold was beginning to form, or whether animal fat had turned rancid. The body learns quickly when survival depends on paying attention to small details. Parasites added another hidden difficulty. Fleas, lice, mites, and other insects thrive in warm, organic materials. Animal furs provided ideal environments for them, especially inside crowded shelters where bodies slept close together for warmth. Archaeologists and anthropologists believe parasite exposure has accompanied human clothing use for an extremely long time. Some researchers studying the evolution of human lice suggest that body lice became common only after humans began regularly wearing clothing or wrapped coverings. In this way, warmth itself may have changed the biological relationship between humans and parasites. Ancient nights were not peaceful scenes of soft fur blankets beside glowing fires. They were often itchy, smoky, crowded, and physically exhausting. Even so, these coverings transformed human survival. A thick hide-blocking wind could preserve enough body heat to prevent dangerous cooling before dawn. A fur layer beneath sleeping bodies reduced heat loss into frozen ground. Multiple overlapping skins trapped warmth from shared breathing inside shelters. These small advantages mattered enormously because prehistoric survival often depended on tiny margins rather than complete protection. Anthropologists studying traditional Arctic clothing have found that carefully layered animal skins can outperform some modern materials under certain conditions, especially when designed for dry, cold environments. This suggests ancient humans gradually developed sophisticated knowledge about how to position fur, layer hides, and preserve warmth efficiently long before written history existed. But knowledge did not remove discomfort. Ancient humans still carried the physical reality of survival on their bodies every day: the smell of smoke inside fur, the stiffness of frozen hides before sunrise, the weight of damp coverings during migration. Warmth before reliable fire was rarely gentle. It was heavy, imperfect, and temporary. Yet inside these difficult materials, human beings found enough protection to continue moving deeper into colder parts of the world. Ancient humans did not enter caves because caves felt safe. They entered because caves were often less dangerous than the open cold outside. In modern imagination, prehistoric caves are sometimes pictured as natural homes waiting quietly for humans to move inside. But real caves were dark, damp, unstable, and frequently occupied by other animals long before humans arrived. Early people did not discover comfort there. They discovered partial protection. A cave could block wind, reduce exposure to rain, and preserve some warmth from bodies and weak fires. During freezing nights, even a small reduction in moving air could mean the difference between surviving until morning or losing too much body heat during sleep. Wind removes warmth from the skin extremely quickly. This effect, now called wind chill, would have shaped prehistoric life constantly. Open landscapes became especially dangerous after sunset, when temperatures dropped further and movement slowed. Caves and rock shelters offered one major advantage immediately. Stone walls interrupted airflow. Cold air still entered, but not with the same force as open plains or exposed hillsides. The earth itself also changes temperature more slowly than air. Deep caves often remain relatively stable inside, compared to rapidly changing outdoor conditions. Ancient humans likely noticed that sheltered stone spaces stayed less extreme during both cold nights and hot days. Archaeological evidence shows that many prehistoric groups repeatedly returned to certain caves over thousands of years. This does not necessarily mean permanent settlement. Instead, caves may have functioned as seasonal refuges, temporary resting places, or protected sleeping sites during difficult weather. Some cave floors preserve traces of repeated fires, animal bones, stone tools, and bedding materials, suggesting that humans organized these spaces carefully when conditions required shelter. Yet caves also came with serious risks. Darkness inside caves is complete once natural light disappears. Without dependable fire, visibility ended almost immediately after sunset. Moving through uneven stone passages in darkness could cause injury. Damp cave air increased discomfort during cold periods. Water dripping from ceilings and condensation along stone surfaces created constant moisture. Wet conditions threatened animal hides, weakened fires, and increased heat loss from the body. Ancient humans may have spent long nights listening to distant water sounds, shifting rock, or movements deeper within caves without being able to see clearly. There was another problem, even more dangerous. Humans were not the only creatures seeking shelter from cold weather. Archaeological discoveries show that many cave systems were used by large predators, including cave bears, lions, hyenas, and wolves during prehistoric periods. Some caves contain alternating evidence of animal and human occupation across different seasons or generations. This suggests that caves were contested spaces rather than secure homes. Entering a cave may have required carefully checking for signs of recent animal activity, such as tracks, smells, droppings, or remains of prey. A sheltered cave with reduced wind could save human warmth, but it could also contain a sleeping predator nearby. Even so, humans continued using caves because the cold outside remained relentless. In freezing climates, shelter became less about comfort and more about slowing heat loss enough to survive. Inside confined stone spaces, body warmth accumulated more effectively. Animal hides stayed somewhat protected from wind. Weak fires, when available, lasted longer without direct exposure to weather. Sleep, though still interrupted and uneasy, became slightly more possible. Caves therefore changed the rhythm of prehistoric nights. People gathered closer together, Sounds carried differently in enclosed darkness. Smoke drifted slowly upward toward unseen stone ceilings. Outside, cold wind continued across the landscape, while inside, small groups of humans tried quietly to preserve warmth until sunrise returned. Long before houses existed, caves became one of the earliest ways humans altered their relationship with cold, not by conquering nature, but by hiding briefly inside it. A cave could protect ancient humans from wind and freezing rain, but once people moved deeper inside, they faced another problem that was slower and less visible. The air itself became difficult to live in. Darkness, smoke, and breathing all gathered together inside enclosed stone spaces, especially during long, cold nights when groups stayed close to preserve warmth. Modern buildings quietly solve these problems through ventilation systems, windows, and controlled heating. Prehistoric caves had none of these things. Warmth and breathable air often worked against each other. The deeper humans sheltered from cold, the harder it became for fresh air to circulate. Fire made this balance even more complicated. A small flame inside a cave created heat and light, but it also consumed oxygen continuously and filled the air with smoke particles. Early fires likely burned inefficiently much of the time because wood was damp or fuel supplies were poor. Weak fires produce more smoke than clean-burning flames. Thick smoke gathered beneath cave ceilings, drifted slowly through enclosed chambers, and settled into lungs, eyes, animal skins, and sleeping spaces. Archaeologists studying prehistoric cave sites have found soot deposits on stone surfaces, evidence that smoke exposure may have been constant for some groups. Ancient humans probably coughed often inside these shelters. Their eyes watered. Breathing became heavy during long nights near smoky fires, yet abandoning the fire meant returning to cold darkness outside. Smoke itself may have shaped where people slept inside caves. Groups likely stayed closer to entrances or partially open chambers where airflow remained possible, even if temperatures were lower there. Deep enclosed sections trapped more warmth, but also concentrated smoke and reduced oxygen. Ancient humans had to balance these dangers carefully through experience. Some caves preserve evidence that hearths were placed strategically near openings or areas with natural airflow patterns. Without scientific knowledge, humans gradually learned which spaces allowed fires to survive without filling the entire shelter with suffocating smoke. Darkness added another layer of difficulty. Firelight inside caves does not spread evenly. Small flames create narrow zones of visibility surrounded by moving shadows. Beyond the fire's reach, darkness becomes complete. Ancient humans resting in caves may have spent much of the night seeing only partial shapes of nearby bodies, stone walls, and drifting smoke, while deeper spaces disappeared entirely into blackness. Human vision evolved for daylight environments. In darkness, hearing becomes more important. Small sounds inside caves echo strangely against stone. Water dripping from ceilings, shifting embers, distant animal movement, or human breathing could all seem amplified during silent nights. Sleep inside these conditions was probably light and fragmented. There was also the simple fact of human breathing itself. A crowded shelter filled with sleeping bodies changes the air gradually over time. Warm breath adds moisture and carbon dioxide to enclosed spaces. Condensation forms on stone surfaces and animal hides. The air becomes heavier and more humid. In winter, this trapped moisture could later cool surfaces even further, increasing discomfort by morning. Ancient humans may not have understood air quality scientifically, but they likely noticed headaches, coughing, dizziness, or breathing discomfort inside poorly ventilated shelters. The body senses stale air quickly, especially near smoke. Even so, caves remained valuable because cold outside was often worse. A smoky, crowded shelter with poor air still reduced exposure to freezing wind and open weather. This reflects an important truth about prehistoric survival. Ancient humans rarely chose between comfort and discomfort. They chose between different kinds of danger. Smoke damaged lungs slowly, while freezing temperatures threatened immediate heat loss. Darkness inside caves felt unsettling, but exposed sleeping under open winter skies carried greater risk. In many ways, prehistoric shelters became places where humans endured controlled hardship in exchange for slightly better odds of surviving the night. Warmth before reliable fire was never simple. Every solution created another problem waiting quietly beside it. Ancient humans were not the first creatures to understand that caves offered protection from cold weather. Long before people entered these shelters, many animals were already using them for warmth, sleep, and survival. During Ice Age periods especially, caves became valuable refuges across harsh landscapes, where freezing wind and deep snow made open ground dangerous at night. This meant that when humans searched for shelter, they often entered spaces already claimed by predators. Archaeological evidence from prehistoric caves frequently contains remains from both humans and large carnivores, layered across different periods of occupation. Cave bears, hyenas, lions, wolves, and other predators used many of the same shelters humans depended on. In some sites, animal bones bearing human cut marks appear alongside evidence of carnivore feeding, suggesting that caves changed hands repeatedly over time. A cave was rarely permanent property. It was temporary survival space shared uneasily between species competing against cold. Cave bears present one of the clearest examples. These massive animals often used caves for hibernation or seasonal shelter long before humans arrived. Some cave systems across Europe contain enormous quantities of bear remains, showing repeated occupation over thousands of years. Entering such spaces carried obvious danger. A startled or protective animal inside confined darkness could kill humans easily. Ancient people likely approached caves carefully, watching for tracks, fur, smells, fresh droppings, or disturbed ground near entrances. The nose may have mattered almost as much as vision during these moments. The smell of animal occupation inside enclosed stone spaces would have been strong and difficult to miss. Yet even dangerous caves remained attractive because the cold outside did not disappear. Wind across open land stripped warmth steadily from the body. Freezing rain soaked hides and sleeping materials. In comparison, a cave with signs of previous animal use still offered something valuable: reduced exposure, slightly warmer air, protection from storms. Ancient humans therefore lived within constant negotiation with the natural world rather than complete control over it. Sometimes people may have entered caves only temporarily, leaving before predators returned. Other times, evidence suggests humans actively defended occupied shelters using fire, noise, tools, or group presence. Fire may have become especially important here, not only for warmth, but for psychological separation between humans and darkness. Many animals avoid open flame and smoke. Even weak fires could create a visible boundary near cave entrances, but before reliable fire existed, that protection remained uncertain. If flames died during the night, humans once again shared darkness with whatever else moved outside the shelter. Sleep inside these conditions was likely shallow. In modern environments, most people sleep assuming walls and locked doors separate them safely from external threats. Prehistoric humans possessed no such certainty. A strange sound outside a cave entrance could mean wind shifting through rocks, but it could also mean another living creature approaching through darkness. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer sleep patterns have noted that lighter sleep and staggered sleeping schedules may help groups remain alert to environmental danger. Ancient cave life may have encouraged similar behavior. Some individuals slept while others remained partially awake near fires or entrances. Even resting required awareness. There is also evidence that humans and predators sometimes occupied different parts of cave systems simultaneously. Deep cave chambers difficult for humans to access may still have housed animals while people remained closer to entrances where light and escape routes existed. This created environments where sounds from unseen creatures echoed through darkness beyond firelight. The psychological effect of this constant uncertainty may have shaped early human fear responses deeply. Darkness was not abstract, it contained real physical risk. Even so, humans continued returning to caves generation after generation. Not because caves were safe, but because they offered enough shelter to reduce the larger danger of exposure to cold. In many ways, prehistoric survival involved choosing manageable threats over uncontrollable ones. A nearby predator could sometimes be avoided or confronted. Freezing temperatures could not be reasoned with at all. So ancient humans slept beneath stone ceilings, listening to wind outside and unknown sounds deeper within the dark, preserving warmth as carefully as possible until morning returned. Long before humans built permanent houses, they learned something simpler but extremely important. Warmth could be preserved by stopping the wind. A freezing night feels far colder when moving air strips heat continuously from the skin. Even without reliable fire, even without thick shelters, reducing airflow around the body could dramatically improve the chance of surviving until morning. Ancient humans may not have understood temperature scientifically, but they understood wind through direct physical experience. Open plains became dangerous after sunset. Hills exposed to strong air currents drained warmth quickly. Wet skin and damp animal hides cooled faster when wind passed across them. Shelter, therefore, began not with walls, but with barriers. Archaeological evidence suggests that prehistoric humans gradually started altering their surroundings to reduce exposure instead of simply enduring it. This was one of the earliest steps toward controlled living spaces. Simple windbreaks may have included stacked branches, animal bones, stone arrangements, stretched hides, or natural landscape features positioned carefully against prevailing air currents. Even a partial barrier changes how heat moves around the body. Once moving air slows down, warmth from human bodies, breathing, and weak fires remains trapped longer near sleeping areas. Modern campers still use this principle when placing tents behind rocks or tree cover to reduce wind chill. Ancient humans likely discovered these patterns through repeated survival rather than formal planning. Small differences in shelter placement could determine whether a night became merely uncomfortable or physically dangerous. Natural terrain itself became part of prehistoric architecture. People may have slept beside rock faces, inside shallow depressions, near fallen trees, or behind earth ridges that blocked direct wind exposure. Valleys often felt warmer than exposed ridgelines because cold air moved differently through the landscape. Groups traveling through unfamiliar regions probably learned quickly which environments protected heat best after sunset. This knowledge would have mattered especially during Ice Age periods, when freezing wind across open land could remove body heat rapidly even without snowfall. In many cases, ancient humans may have preferred imperfect shelter with reduced wind over completely open spaces with easier visibility. Wind affects fire as well. Weak flames burn unevenly in moving air, consuming fuel faster while producing less stable heat. A sheltered fire survives longer and requires less energy to maintain. This means early wind barriers likely protected both human bodies and fragile sources of warmth at the same time. Archaeologists studying prehistoric hearths have found evidence that some fires were positioned strategically near stone walls or sheltered sections of campsites, possibly to reduce airflow and preserve heat. Before humans understood insulation in any scientific sense, they were already shaping environments to control how heat escaped. These early shelters were probably temporary and constantly rebuilt. Animal hides stretched across branches loosened during storms. Wood shifted under snow or heavy rain. Strong winds could tear apart carefully arranged barriers overnight. Ancient humans likely spent significant time repairing and adjusting sleeping spaces rather than constructing permanent homes. Survival required flexibility because migration remained common. Groups followed animals, seasonal plants, and changing climates across large distances. Shelter had to be created quickly using available materials. Yet even temporary structures changed human life profoundly. They allowed warmth to gather. They reduced exposure during sleep. They created small, protected spaces where bodies, breath, hides, and weak fires combined to resist the cold together. This marks an important transition in prehistoric survival. Humans were no longer relying only on the body itself for warmth. They were beginning to shape the surrounding environment deliberately to slow heat loss. The earliest shelters were not designed for comfort, beauty, or privacy. They existed for one quiet purpose: to stop enough wind that human warmth could remain alive until morning. One of the coldest surfaces in the prehistoric world was not the air, it was the ground itself. Stone, frozen soil, wet earth, and packed snow pulled heat steadily from the human body during rest. A person lying directly on cold ground loses warmth through contact, even when wrapped in animal hides. Ancient humans likely understood this danger long before they understood the reason. Some places simply felt colder to sleep on than others. By morning, bodies resting against bare stone or damp soil may have woken stiff, exhausted, and dangerously chilled. Over time, humans began placing materials between themselves and the earth. Grass, moss, leaves, bark, and dry plant fibers became some of the earliest forms of insulation ever used by our species. These materials worked for the same reason fur worked. They trapped small pockets of still air. Dry grass layered thickly beneath sleeping bodies reduced direct heat transfer into cold ground. Moss could create soft raised surfaces that stayed warmer than exposed stone. Leaves and branches added separation between skin and frozen earth. Archaeological evidence from several prehistoric sites suggests that ancient humans intentionally gathered bedding materials rather than sleeping directly on bare cave floors or open soil. Traces of grasses, reeds, and plant fibers have been discovered in some ancient sleeping areas, indicating that warmth preservation had become an organized part of shelter preparation. Dryness mattered greatly. Wet plant material quickly loses much of its insulating ability because water transfers heat far more efficiently than trapped air. Ancient humans probably spent large amounts of time searching for dry grasses, stripping bark, replacing damp bedding, and protecting sleeping surfaces from rain or melting snow. A bedding layer that felt warm at sunset could become cold and dangerous before dawn if moisture entered it overnight. Even human breath inside enclosed shelters added humidity to sleeping spaces. This meant insulation was not permanent. It required constant maintenance. In some colder environments, prehistoric groups may also have dug shallow sleeping depressions into the earth itself. Soil temperature changes more slowly below the surface than exposed air temperatures above ground. A shallow pit, protected from wind and lined with dry material, could conserve warmth more effectively than sleeping directly on open terrain. Some archaeologists believe certain prehistoric shelters included intentionally prepared floor layers made from grasses, ash, or organic material designed partly for insulation. Ash from old fires may even have helped keep some sleeping surfaces drier by absorbing moisture. These early strategies reveal an important change in human behavior. Warmth was no longer coming only from bodies, hides, or fragile fires. Humans were beginning to control heat indirectly by shaping the environment around sleep. The sleeping place itself became a tool for survival. This likely affected nightly routines deeply. Before rest could begin, people may have needed to gather fresh bedding, clear damp ground, repair shelter walls, and arrange insulating layers carefully. Sleep in prehistoric life required preparation long before eyes closed in darkness. There is also evidence from ethnographic studies of traditional societies that certain plants may have been selected not only for softness or insulation, but because they resisted insects or stayed drier longer. Some aromatic plants naturally repel parasites, while certain mosses absorb moisture efficiently. Ancient humans may not have explained these effects scientifically, but repeated experience would have revealed which materials created better nights and which increased discomfort. The cold forced humans to become careful observers of small environmental details. A patch of dry grass hidden from rain could matter more than a large open space with no insulation at all. These sleeping layers were fragile, temporary, and often uncomfortable by modern standards. Yet they marked another quiet step in human adaptation. Long before insulated homes and manufactured bedding existed, ancient people had already begun engineering warmth from the simplest materials around them. Grass, moss, bark, and earth became part of an invisible struggle against heat loss, helping human bodies hold on to warmth just a little longer through the cold prehistoric night. In some of the coldest prehistoric landscapes humans ever entered, trees were rare, caves were absent, and winter wind moved freely across open ground for enormous distances. Yet people still survived there. Archaeological discoveries from parts of Eastern Europe and northern Eurasia suggest that some Ice Age humans began building shelters from one of the few large materials available around them, mammoth bones. These structures were not houses in the modern sense, but they reveal something important about human adaptation to cold. People were no longer only hiding inside natural shelter. They were constructing protected spaces deliberately in environments where nature offered very little protection at all. Mammoths were enormous animals, and after successful hunts or scavenging events, their remains provided far more than food. Bones, tusks, hides, fat, and sinew all became valuable resources. Archaeologists have uncovered circular or oval arrangements of mammoth bones at several prehistoric sites, some dating back tens of thousands of years. These sites often contain hearths, stone tools, butchered animal remains, and evidence of repeated occupation. Researchers believe many of these bone arrangements formed the framework of shelters covered with hides, grasses, or other insulating materials. In treeless Ice Age regions, mammoth bones may have replaced wood as structural support. The bones themselves did not create warmth, but they helped humans trap it. A shelter blocking wind changes survival completely in freezing conditions. Once airflow slows, heat from bodies, fires, and insulated bedding remains concentrated longer inside enclosed spaces. Mammoth bone structures may have created some of the earliest semi-engineered winter shelters humans ever used regularly in extreme cold environments. Large curved tusks and heavy bones could support stretched animal hides much like tent poles. Thick hides layered over these frames may have reduced wind penetration while helping retain internal warmth. Inside such shelters, groups sleeping closely together beside weak fires could create temperatures noticeably higher than outside air, even during harsh winters. Building these shelters required planning, labor, and cooperation. Mammoth bones were extremely heavy. Transporting and arranging them was not simple work for small prehistoric groups already surviving in difficult climates. This suggests that shelter construction itself had become an organized survival activity rather than an improvised response to weather. Ancient humans were beginning to reshape hostile environments actively instead of relying only on natural caves or temporary windbreaks. Fire likely played a central role inside many of these structures, but even here warmth remained fragile. Smoke accumulated easily beneath hide coverings. Fuel remained difficult to gather in regions with few trees. Cold air still entered through gaps. Animal hides stiffened in freezing weather. Snow and moisture threatened insulation continuously. Yet compared to sleeping directly under open sky, these shelters represented an enormous improvement. They allowed heat to linger. They created boundaries between human bodies and relentless wind. Some researchers believe certain mammoth bone shelters may even have been revisited seasonally over long periods, suggesting that humans remembered and reused protected locations during migrations. This points toward an important psychological change as well. Shelter was becoming something people could create intentionally, not merely discover accidentally. Warmth slowly shifted from being entirely dependent on the body and uncertain fire towards something shaped through architecture, however primitive. Still, life inside these shelters was likely difficult by modern standards. Smoke darkened the air. Sleeping spaces remained crowded. Animal smells, damp hides, and shifting cold persisted constantly. Winter outside remained enormous and dangerous, but inside circles of bone and hide, human beings managed to preserve enough warmth to continue living in places that once may have seemed impossible to survive at all. In many ways, these structures reveal one of the quiet turning points in prehistoric life. Humans had begun building warmth itself into the landscape around them. For ancient humans, sleep was rarely a single long period of uninterrupted rest. Cold environments made that difficult long before modern shelters or reliable fire existed. During freezing nights, the body constantly lost heat into surrounding air, damp ground, and moving wind. Remaining completely still for many hours could become dangerous because body temperature naturally drops during sleep. Modern humans still experience this today, though insulated homes hide most of its effects. Core temperature decreases slightly during the night as part of the body's circadian rhythm. In prehistoric conditions, however, even small drops in warmth may have mattered much more. Ancient sleep was shaped not only by darkness and fatigue, but by the continuous need to preserve heat. Researchers studying traditional hunter-gatherer societies have observed that sleep patterns often differ from modern industrial schedules. Sleep may occur in segments, with periods of waking during the night rather than one uninterrupted block. Historians also know that segmented sleep remained common in many parts of the world, even into recent centuries, before artificial lighting changed human routines. For prehistoric humans facing cold nights, this fragmented style of rest may have carried practical advantages. Waking periodically allowed people to adjust coverings, reposition near others, feed weak fires, or respond to changes in weather and sound. In freezing environments, complete immobility for long periods increases heat loss. Small movements help restore circulation and generate warmth. Ancient humans may have shifted constantly through the night without fully understanding why their bodies resisted remaining still. Sleeping posture mattered as well. Curling the body inward reduces exposed surface area and protects heat near the chest and abdomen. Many mammals naturally sleep this way during cold weather. Humans still do it instinctively. Archaeological evidence cannot preserve sleeping positions directly, but anthropologists believe prehistoric people likely slept closely, packed together in compact spaces, partly for warmth conservation. A group sharing body heat inside sheltered areas could create conditions where shorter sleep cycles became more manageable because warmth remained available nearby, even after brief awakenings. Fire, when present, may actually have encouraged interrupted sleep rather than uninterrupted rest. Weak fires required maintenance, fuel needed adjusting, embers faded. Smoke changed direction as airflow shifted through shelters or cave entrances. Someone waking occasionally to monitor fire could help preserve warmth for the entire group. In this way, sleep and survival became closely connected activities rather than separate parts of life. The night was not simply a time when humans stopped functioning. It remained an active environmental challenge, continuing until sunrise. Cold also changes how the brain experiences rest. Modern sleep studies show that uncomfortable temperatures increase nighttime waking and reduce deep restorative sleep. Ancient humans likely experienced this constantly during harsh seasons. A person sleeping beneath damp hides on cold ground may have drifted repeatedly between light sleep and wakefulness, while muscles tightened against falling temperatures. The body itself resisted surrendering fully to deep unconsciousness in dangerous conditions. This may help explain why ancient nights were often socially shared experiences rather than isolated individual rest. Groups remained partially aware together. Some people stirred while others slept. Small sounds inside shelters continued through darkness. Breathing, coughing, shifting hides, weak fire crackling against stone. Warmth required ongoing attention even during exhaustion. Yet humans adapted remarkably to these conditions over immense stretches of time. The body learned rhythms shaped by cold environments and uncertain shelter. Sleep became flexible rather than fixed. Ancient humans may not have expected perfect rest. Instead, they expected survival first and recovery second. In a world before dependable warmth, even sleeping had to remain partly alert. The night did not fully belong to rest yet. It still belonged partly to the cold. In prehistoric nights, fire rarely burned unattended for long. Even after humans became more familiar with using flames, many fires remained weak, unstable, and temporary. A small change in wind could scatter sparks. Damp fuel could choke heat beneath thick smoke. Embers buried too deeply beneath ash might fade silently while everyone slept. Because of this, some ancient nights may have included people who stayed partly awake beside the fire while others rested nearby. These were not guards in the modern sense. They were watchers of warmth itself. The survival of the group often depended on whether the fire survived until morning. Archaeologists studying ancient hearths have found evidence that many prehistoric fires were relatively small and repeatedly maintained over time rather than built as enormous continuous flames. Fuel was precious, especially in cold regions where dry wood could be difficult to gather. Burning too much fuel early in the night risked having nothing left before dawn, when temperatures often became coldest. Ancient humans, therefore, may have managed fires carefully, feeding them slowly rather than allowing large flames to consume resources quickly. This required attention through the night. Someone waking periodically to stir embers or add material could preserve heat far longer than a neglected fire burning intensely for only a short time. Firelight also changed human awareness after dark. Before dependable flames, nighttime beyond the shelter remained almost completely invisible. Weak fire created only a small island of light surrounded by darkness. Ancient humans sitting near these fires may have listened constantly to sounds beyond visibility. Cracking branches, shifting wind, distant animal movement, dripping cave water, breathing from sleeping bodies nearby. The fire did not remove fear entirely. It reduced uncertainty only within a narrow circle. Beyond the edge of light, the world remained unknown. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer groups have observed that sleep within communal environments often becomes staggered naturally. Some people wake while others sleep. Movement, coughing, changing position, or tending fire creates overlapping periods of awareness throughout the night. Researchers have even suggested that in group sleeping arrangements, there are often very few moments when everyone is asleep simultaneously. In prehistoric conditions, this may have provided important protection against predators, environmental danger, or failing warmth. The group remained partly conscious as a collective system even during exhaustion. Firewatching may also have shaped early human social behavior in quieter ways. The night created long stretches of low activity where people stayed near warmth rather than traveling or hunting. Speech around weak fires was likely softer and slower than daytime communication. Firelight changes how faces appear, emphasizing eyes and movement while hiding distant detail. Some anthropologists believe nighttime gatherings around fire gradually encourage storytelling, memory sharing, and social bonding. Yet, in the earlier periods of unreliable fire, these gatherings were probably less relaxed than later romantic images suggest. A weak fire demanded practical attention constantly. If flames shrank too much, cold entered quickly. If smoke thickened, breathing became difficult inside enclosed shelters. If fuel ran low before sunrise, people faced hours of dangerous cooling while still exhausted from previous nights. Ancient humans likely slept knowing that warmth remained temporary. This uncertainty may explain why fires were often positioned near sleeping areas rather than separated into distinct spaces. Heat needed to stay close to resting bodies. People may have arranged themselves according to warmth distribution, with children or vulnerable individuals nearest protected heat, while others stayed closer to entrances or exposed edges of shelters. The fire became the center not only of light, but of physical survival itself. Still, even the best-maintained prehistoric fire could fail. Rain entered shelters, wood remained damp, wind changed direction unexpectedly. Many nights probably ended with fading embers rather than steady flames. In those moments, the watchers around the fire were not simply preserving comfort. They were holding back the cold for a few more hours while the rest of the group tried to sleep beside them in darkness. Cold did not simply make ancient humans uncomfortable at night, it changed the structure of rest itself. Modern sleep often happens inside stable environments where temperature remains carefully controlled for hours without interruption. Prehistoric humans rarely experienced such conditions. Their nights were shaped by shifting wind, fading fires, damp bedding, crowded shelters, and bodies constantly losing heat into the surrounding world. Because of this, rest in ancient environments may have been less about achieving deep comfort and more about surviving repeated cycles of recovery before the next period of cold awareness returned. Human sleep is closely connected to body temperature. In modern physiology, the body normally cools slightly before and during sleep as part of its natural rhythm. This cooling helps signal the brain that it is time to rest. But in freezing environments, the relationship becomes more complicated. If the body loses heat too rapidly, sleep becomes unstable, muscles tense, shivering interrupts deeper stages of rest. The nervous system remains alert to discomfort and environmental danger. Ancient humans likely experienced these interruptions regularly during cold seasons, especially before reliable fire and insulated shelter became common. Researchers studying sleep in difficult environmental conditions have found that cold exposure increases nighttime waking and reduces time spent in deep, restorative sleep. Even mild discomfort can fragment rest repeatedly without fully waking a person into complete awareness. Ancient humans may therefore have drifted through nights filled with partial awakenings, shifting positions beneath hides, pulling limbs closer to the chest, or moving nearer to other sleeping bodies for warmth. The body adapted continuously to changing temperature while still trying to recover energy from the day. In many ways, prehistoric sleep may have existed somewhere between rest and environmental vigilance. The cold also changed how humans used time during darkness. Long winter nights in Ice Age climates could last many hours beyond sunset. Without stable artificial light, activity naturally slowed, yet complete sleep may not have filled the entire night continuously. People may have alternated between resting, waking quietly near weak fires, adjusting shelter materials, eating small amounts of food, or simply remaining awake, listening to weather and movement outside. Historians studying pre-industrial societies have documented forms of segmented sleep, where people rested in multiple phases, separated by periods of quiet wakefulness. While prehistoric life cannot be reconstructed perfectly, cold environments may have encouraged similar patterns long before recorded history. Children and older adults likely experienced these conditions differently. Infants lose heat quickly and wake more often when cold. Elderly bodies regulate temperature less efficiently and may struggle to maintain warmth during long periods of stillness. This means the rhythms of group sleep were probably shaped partly by the needs of vulnerable individuals. Crying children, coughing adults, movement near fading fires, and changing weather all interrupted the silence of ancient nights. Sleep became communal rather than strictly individual. One person waking could affect the rest of the group. Even dreams may have been influenced by these conditions. Modern sleep research shows that temperature affects sleep quality, emotional regulation, and the vividness of nighttime experiences. Ancient humans spending nights in uncertain warmth, surrounded by darkness and environmental sounds, likely carried very different relationships with nighttime consciousness than modern people do today. The boundary between waking and sleeping may have felt less stable in environments where danger remained physically close throughout the night. Yet despite these hardships, humans endured. Over thousands of generations, the body and mind adapted to nights that rarely offered complete safety or comfort. Rest became flexible, sleep became layered with awareness. The cold shaped not only how humans survived darkness, but how they experienced it internally. Long before modern bedrooms existed, human sleep had already been formed by wind, breath, weak firelight, and the quiet effort of the body trying to remain warm until dawn. Ancient humans did not move across the world randomly. Long before maps, roads, or permanent cities existed, survival often depended on following temperature itself. Cold shaped migration quietly but constantly. Groups moved not only toward food and water, but toward places where human bodies could continue holding enough warmth to survive the coming nights. Seasonal movement became one of the oldest strategies for managing cold before reliable fire. Insulated shelter or stored fuel could fully protect people from harsh climates. In prehistoric life, remaining too long in one place could become dangerous when weather patterns changed. A valley that felt survivable during late summer might become exposed and frozen by winter. Rivers froze, winds shifted direction, animal migrations changed, vegetation disappeared beneath snow or frost. Ancient humans learned to read these environmental patterns carefully because temperature affected nearly every part of daily existence. Hunting became harder in deep snow. Wet conditions ruined bedding and hides. Cold nights drained energy even during sleep. Migration, therefore, became connected directly to preserving body heat as much as finding food. Archaeological evidence suggests that many prehistoric groups followed seasonal cycles repeatedly across familiar territories. Some regions were occupied during warmer months and abandoned during colder periods. Shelters, caves, and campsites show signs of intermittent use rather than permanent continuous settlement. This pattern reflects an important reality of prehistoric life. Humans often adapted to cold by avoiding the harshest conditions whenever possible, rather than enduring them endlessly in one location. Movement itself became a form of climate control. Animals likely guided many of these migrations. Herd species such as reindeer, bison, mammoths, and horses moved according to seasonal vegetation and temperature changes. Human groups following these animals naturally moved through shifting thermal environments as well. A migration route that provided food also provided access to animal hides, fat, and protected terrain necessary for warmth. In this way, survival systems became connected. Food, shelter, and temperature could not easily be separated from one another in prehistoric life. Wind played a major role in deciding where humans stayed. Open plains exposed bodies directly to moving cold air, especially during nighttime rest. Valleys, forests, cliffsides, and sheltered riverbanks often retained warmth slightly better because terrain interrupted airflow. Ancient humans probably learned through repeated experience which landscapes felt less punishing after sunset. Some campsites may have been chosen less for beauty or visibility, and more because they reduced nighttime heat loss. Modern people still feel these differences instinctively today. A sheltered place beside trees often feels warmer than exposed open ground, even at the same air temperature. Ancient humans depended on this awareness constantly. Migration also helped preserve limited resources needed for warmth. Wood suitable for fire, dry grasses for bedding, and animal populations for hides could all become depleted if groups remained too long in one place. Moving seasonally allowed environments time to recover, while humans followed changing conditions across large territories. In colder climates especially, this flexibility may have been essential. Permanent settlement without reliable heating systems would have exposed groups to prolonged winter hardship that prehistoric technology could not always overcome safely. Yet migration carried risks of its own. Traveling during cold weather meant exposure to freezing wind, wet conditions, and uncertain shelter. Fires were difficult to transport. Children and elderly individuals moved more slowly. New landscapes might contain unfamiliar predators or dangerous terrain. Ancient humans therefore balanced two kinds of danger constantly. Staying too long risked starvation and worsening cold. Moving risked exhaustion and exposure during travel itself. Through thousands of years, humans learned to follow rhythms hidden within climate and season. The path to survival was often not toward permanent warmth, because such places rarely existed. It was toward moments of lesser cold, temporary shelter, and landscapes where the human body could lose heat just slowly enough to endure another season. To ancient humans, landscapes did not all feel the same after sunset. Some places became unbearably exposed once darkness and cold arrived, while others seemed to hold warmth slightly longer through the night. Valleys often became some of the most valuable places for survival, not because they were truly warm, but because they reduced certain dangers that open land could not. In prehistoric life, even small differences in wind, moisture, and ground protection could decide whether the body preserved enough heat to last until morning. Open plains may have offered visibility during the day, but at night they became difficult places to rest. Wind moved freely across flat land without interruption. Cold air stripped warmth from exposed skin, animal hides, and weak fires continuously. There were few natural barriers to slow airflow or trap body heat. A sleeping group on open terrain faced constant exposure from every direction. Ancient humans likely understood this physically long before they understood weather scientifically. Some places simply felt harsher at night. Valleys changed these conditions in several important ways. Hillsides and surrounding terrain interrupted moving air, reducing the force of wind near the ground. Trees and vegetation, when present, provided additional shelter. Fires survived more easily in calmer air. Smoke dispersed differently. Animal hides stayed slightly drier when protected from direct exposure. Even the psychological experience of night may have changed inside sheltered terrain. Open landscapes leave the body exposed not only to weather, but to visibility and sound from all directions. Valleys narrowed space and created boundaries that may have felt more manageable during darkness. Temperature itself behaves differently across landscapes. Cold air often sinks downward into lower areas after sunset, but valleys with tree cover, rock shelter, or reduced wind can still feel less punishing than elevated open plains where moving air constantly removes body heat. Ancient humans likely learned to judge these environmental patterns carefully through repeated migration and survival. A location chosen poorly could turn an already exhausting night into a dangerous one. Archaeological evidence shows that many prehistoric campsites appeared near rivers, valley systems, cliff bases, or naturally sheltered terrain rather than exposed high ground. These locations offered more than water access. They created environments where heat could be conserved slightly more effectively. Valleys also concentrated resources important for warmth. Water attracted animals. Vegetation, suitable for bedding and shelter materials, often grew more densely there. Trees provided fuel for fire when available. Rock overhangs and caves appeared more commonly along valley walls than across open plains. In this way, geography itself shaped the human ability to preserve warmth. Ancient people were not simply searching for beautiful places to live. They were searching for places where the body suffered less during the night. Yet valleys were never perfectly safe. Water sources increased moisture in the air. Fog and condensation could soak bedding and hides by morning. Flooding threatened low ground during storms or seasonal thaw. Dense vegetation reduced visibility and sometimes concealed predators. Cold air pooling in enclosed valleys during winter could create severe freezing conditions before sunrise. Ancient humans, therefore, balanced advantages and risks constantly. No landscape solved every problem. Some only reduced certain dangers enough to make survival possible. Over time, this relationship with geography may have shaped human memory and movement deeply. Groups likely remembered sheltered routes, protected sleeping areas, and seasonal valleys where winters felt slightly less severe. Knowledge of terrain became part of survival knowledge, passed across generations. A valley that blocked winter wind may have mattered as much as a successful hunting ground. Long before maps existed, humans carried mental landscapes, shaped partly by warmth and exposure. Even today, people still search instinctively for shelter during cold weather. We stand beside walls to block wind. We gather in lower protected spaces during storms. We seek corners, trees, buildings, and enclosed places where the body loses heat more slowly. These habits may echo a much older world, where geography itself quietly determined who remained warm enough to survive the night. Ancient humans did not experience warmth as a fixed condition. Warmth changed from place to place, season to season, and even hour to hour depending on the landscape around them. Over thousands of years, people gradually developed an invisible understanding of geography based not only on food or water, but on how environments affected the human body after dark. Certain places slowed heat loss. Others magnified it. Before reliable fire or permanent heated shelter existed, survival depended partly on learning the geography of warmth itself. Mountains, forests, valleys, rivers, caves, coastlines, and open plains each created different thermal worlds. Wind moved differently through every landscape. Moisture gathered differently. Ground temperatures changed according to sunlight, vegetation, and elevation. Ancient humans likely noticed these patterns through repeated physical experience long before they could explain them. A campsite near stone cliffs might feel less exposed than one only a short distance away on open ground. A dense forest reduced wind but trapped dampness. Rocky overhangs blocked rain while holding cold air near stone surfaces. Every environment carried advantages and hidden costs connected directly to preserving body heat. Forests may have offered some of the earliest naturally protected environments for human rest. Trees interrupt wind, create layers of trapped air, and reduce direct exposure to weather. Fallen leaves and dry vegetation provide insulating material for bedding. Wood supplies fuel when available. Yet forests also create shade that limits daytime warming during colder seasons. Moisture lingers beneath dense vegetation, increasing the risk of damp sleeping conditions. Ancient humans moving through forests had to balance shelter from wind against the dangers of wetness and reduced visibility. Coastal regions created different challenges: large bodies of water, moderate temperature slightly, sometimes reducing the most extreme cold compared to inland areas. But coastal wind and moisture increase heat loss rapidly, especially during storms. Salt air damages, exposed skin, and affects fires. Wet conditions soak bedding materials quickly. Ancient humans living near coastlines may have benefited from food abundance while struggling constantly against damp cold that penetrated hides and shelter materials. High elevations carried even greater risks. Mountains exposed humans to stronger wind, colder temperatures, and rapidly changing weather, yet mountainous terrain also provided caves, rock shelters, and defensible sleeping locations. Ancient migration routes through upland regions likely depended heavily on seasonal timing because winter conditions could become deadly very quickly at higher elevations. Archaeological evidence suggests many prehistoric groups moved vertically through landscapes according to season, spending colder periods in lower sheltered areas while traveling higher during warmer months. This reveals how carefully humans adjusted movement according to environmental warmth long before climate science existed. Even sunlight shaped prehistoric geography deeply. South-facing slopes in colder northern regions receive more sunlight during winter months and may remain warmer or less snow-covered than shaded northern slopes. Ancient humans probably recognized these differences instinctively. A sleeping place exposed to afternoon sunlight could feel very different after sunset than one remaining cold throughout the day. Modern animals still choose resting locations according to solar warmth and wind protection. Humans likely did the same across prehistoric landscapes. Over time, knowledge about warmth became tied to memory, storytelling, and migration patterns. Groups may have remembered which valleys stayed survivable during early winter, which caves trapped too much moisture, which ridges became impossible during storms, and where dry grasses could still be gathered after heavy frost. This information was not abstract geography. It was physical survival knowledge carried across generations. The world became mapped, partly through the experience of cold. Long before written language recorded human understanding, the body itself was already reading the landscape constantly. A sheltered hillside meant reduced shivering at night. A damp lowland meant wet hides by morning. A narrow valley could preserve enough warmth for children to sleep more safely through winter wind. In this way, ancient humans slowly transformed the environment into something more than wilderness. They learned where warmth moved, where it disappeared, and where fragile human life could endure the night with slightly less suffering than the land surrounding it. For most of human history, fire was not a guaranteed part of every night. Ancient people may have understood flame long before they could create it reliably whenever needed. A fire could die during rain, disappear in strong wind, or fail completely if dry fuel became scarce. Early humans likely spent long periods depending on naturally occurring fires started by lightning strikes, wildfires, or volcanic activity before learning how to preserve and transport embers carefully between camps. This meant warmth remained uncertain. The cold still controlled much of human sleep, movement, and shelter, but slowly, over immense stretches of time, something changed. Humans became better at keeping fire alive. This transformation did not happen suddenly. Archaeological evidence suggests that controlled fire use developed gradually across different regions and periods, rather than appearing all at once. Some ancient sites preserve traces of repeated hearths, burned bones, charcoal, and heat-altered stone dating back hundreds of thousands of years. Yet researchers still debate exactly when humans gained dependable mastery over creating fire intentionally rather than simply maintaining naturally obtained flames. What seems clearer is that once fire became more reliable, human life began changing in ways that reached far beyond warmth alone. Reliable fire altered the structure of the night itself. Before stable fire, darkness remained almost complete after sunset. Human activity slowed because visibility disappeared. Cold intensified. Predators moved unseen beyond shelter boundaries. But dependable fire created small zones where warmth and light could continue for longer periods. Nights became slightly less hostile. Sleep may have deepened somewhat when fires remained active until dawn. Shelters stayed warmer. Damp hides dried more effectively. Wet bedding became easier to manage. Weak muscles, exhausted from shivering, could finally rest with less interruption. Fire also changed how humans used space. Earlier, shelters focused mainly on blocking wind and preserving body heat, but stable hearths allowed people to organize sleeping areas around controlled warmth. Archaeologists studying prehistoric campsites have found evidence that some shelters were arranged with central hearths surrounded by activity zones and resting spaces. This suggests humans began designing living environments around fire rather than simply enduring whatever conditions nature provided. Warmth became more predictable. The body no longer depended entirely on movement, shared heat, or thick animal coverings to survive cold nights. Cooking transformed survival as well. Heated food requires less energy to chew and digest, allowing the body to absorb calories more efficiently. Warm meals also increase internal heat production temporarily, which may have helped humans recover energy during cold seasons. Some researchers believe reliable fire and cooking contributed significantly to human biological development over long periods by changing nutrition and energy use. In freezing environments especially, this mattered enormously. Better nourishment improved the body's ability to maintain warmth during sleep and endure cold exposure during travel or hunting. Smoke still remained a problem. Fires still failed sometimes. Fuel still required constant gathering. Yet dependable fire reduced certain forms of suffering that had shaped human nights for countless generations. A stable flame allowed people to dry wet fur before sleep. It kept some predators at greater distance. It preserved warmth inside shelters even after bodies stopped moving. Ancient humans no longer needed to rely entirely on shivering and shared body heat once flames could survive through the night more consistently. This change may also have altered human psychology. Fire created predictable warmth in a world where warmth had previously been fragile and temporary. For the first time, humans could begin expecting some protection from the cold rather than merely hoping to endure it. The night became less completely controlled by the environment outside. Yet even then, warmth remained labor. Wood had to be gathered, embers protected, smoke tolerated, fire watched constantly. Reliable fire did not remove hardship from prehistoric life, but it shifted something fundamental. Humans were beginning to create controlled warmth deliberately instead of borrowing it only from bodies, hides, and shelter. The cold had not disappeared, but for the first time, it no longer ruled every hour of the night entirely alone. For countless generations, ancient humans slept while the cold pressed constantly against the edges of survival. Bodies shivered through darkness. Fires faded unexpectedly. Wind entered shelters through gaps that could not be fully sealed. Sleep remained shallow because the environment itself demanded attention, even during exhaustion. But when humans slowly became more capable of maintaining reliable fire through the night, something subtle may have happened for the first time. Some nights became quiet enough for deeper rest. Not perfect comfort, not complete safety, but moments where the body no longer fought continuously against heat loss every minute until sunrise. Reliable warmth changes the nervous system. Modern sleep science shows that the body rests most deeply within stable temperature ranges where muscles can relax and internal energy no longer needs to be spent preserving core heat aggressively. Ancient humans likely experienced fragments of this long before insulated homes existed, but dependable fire may have extended those moments significantly. A steady hearth reduced the need for constant shivering. Hands and feet stayed warmer. Damp hides dried more effectively before sleep. Breathing cold air still challenged the body, but the sharpest edge of freezing exposure softened slightly within firelit shelters. This may have changed not only how humans slept, but how they felt after waking. A body that conserves energy during the night functions differently the next day. Hunting becomes easier when muscles are less exhausted. Thinking remains clearer when sleep is less fragmented. Children recover more effectively. Illness becomes slightly easier to survive. Over long periods, reliable nighttime warmth may have improved the resilience of entire groups even if living conditions remained harsh by modern standards. Ancient humans probably did not describe this as comfort in the way people understand comfort now. They may simply have noticed that some shelters allowed mornings to arrive with less suffering than before. Fire also altered the emotional texture of the night. Before stable flames, darkness outside shelter boundaries remained overwhelming. Sounds beyond visibility carried constant uncertainty, but a sustained fire changes how humans perceive enclosed space. Light flickers across nearby faces and walls. Warmth remains physically present instead of disappearing completely after sunset. The body gradually learns that some protection will likely continue through the night rather than vanish unexpectedly at any moment. This may have allowed periods of deeper psychological relaxation for the first time in human history. Anthropologists studying communal fire use among traditional societies have often noted that evening fires encourage slower speech, longer social interaction, and calmer group behavior after daytime labor ends. In prehistoric environments, these effects may have emerged gradually as fire reliability improved. Nights became more than periods of endurance alone. People could remain awake beside warmth without immediately focusing all attention on survival. Storytelling, memory sharing, tool repair, quiet observation, and social bonding may all have expanded partly because reliable fire extended usable nighttime space beyond immediate fear and cold management. Sleep itself likely became more organized around hearths. Archaeological evidence from some prehistoric sites suggests repeated placement of sleeping areas near stable fire locations inside shelters or caves. Warmth distribution shaped where bodies rested. Vulnerable individuals may have slept closest to protected heat, while others formed outer layers near entrances or colder sections of shelters. Human groups were learning how to arrange space according to thermal needs rather than mere proximity. Yet even these improved nights remained fragile. Fires still failed during storms. Fuel supplies still ran low. Smoke still filled enclosed spaces. Predators still existed beyond firelight. Ancient humans had not conquered the cold, but for the first time, they may have begun experiencing stretches of darkness where survival no longer demanded constant physical resistance every moment. Some nights became warm enough for breathing to slow naturally, warm enough for muscles to loosen beneath animal hides, warm enough for exhaustion to become actual sleep rather than temporary unconsciousness interrupted by cold again and again before dawn. The first truly restful human nights may not have arrived suddenly. They may have appeared quietly, ember by ember, beside fires that finally lasted long enough for the body to believe morning would come before the warmth disappeared. For ancient humans, reliable warmth did more than protect the body. Over long periods of time, it may also have changed the human mind itself. Before dependable fire, much of nighttime awareness was occupied by immediate physical survival. The body remained alert to cold, darkness, predators, and the fading of fragile heat sources. Sleep was interrupted, attention stayed close to danger. But as humans gradually became better at preserving warmth through shelters, clothing, shared sleeping, and more reliable fire, the brain may have gained something unusual for the first time. Small stretches of safety where thought could move beyond the next moment of survival. Modern neuroscience shows that chronic stress changes how humans think, sleep, and remember. Bodies exposed continuously to danger remain in heightened states of alertness. Attention narrows toward immediate threats. Deep rest becomes difficult. Ancient humans living through freezing nights likely experienced this constantly for enormous stretches of history. Reliable warmth may therefore have reduced not only physical strain, but mental strain as well. A stable fire through the night meant fewer abrupt awakenings from cold, better sleep, improved memory, mood regulation, and decision-making. The body could spend less energy simply defending its core temperature and more energy on recovery and cognition. This change was probably gradual and uneven across regions and time periods, but its effects may have reached deeply into human social development. Firelight itself also altered the experience of nighttime consciousness. Unlike daylight, fire creates enclosed visual worlds. People near a hearth can see one another clearly, while darkness hides distant surroundings. Anthropologists studying traditional evening gatherings have noted that fire often encourages quieter conversation, storytelling, reflection, and shared attention. The rhythm of speech slows beside stable warmth. Movement decreases. Faces remain visible longer into the night. Ancient humans may have spent increasing amounts of time in this state once reliable fire became part of ordinary survival. This matters because human culture depends heavily on memory shared across generations. Stories, hunting knowledge, migration routes, weather patterns, animal behavior, and social rules all needed to be remembered before writing existed. Cold, exhaustion, and constant vigilance limit how much attention the brain can devote to these activities. Warmth may therefore have supported not only survival, but the growth of human communication itself. Even silence around fire could shape the mind differently from silent darkness in exposed cold. There is also evidence that warmth affects emotional behavior. Modern humans instinctively associate physical warmth with safety, closeness, and calmness. Studies in psychology have found subtle links between physical temperature and feelings of trust or social connection, though such effects are complex and limited. In prehistoric life, these associations may have developed through direct survival experience. Warmth meant protected sleep, shared bodies, stable fire, reduced shivering, and lower risk of death during the night. Cold meant exposure, exhaustion, isolation, and danger. Over thousands of generations, the human nervous system may have woven these experiences deeply into emotional memory. Even today, people gather instinctively around fires, blankets, heated rooms, and shared spaces during cold weather. The emotional comfort of warmth may carry echoes from prehistoric survival itself. Yet reliable warmth also changed human expectations slowly. Earlier, humans may have viewed cold as an unavoidable force dominating every night. But once fire and shelter became more dependable, people could begin anticipating warmth intentionally rather than merely hoping for survival. This subtle shift matters psychologically. The future becomes easier to imagine when immediate suffering decreases slightly. Planning expands. Attention stretches further ahead than the next freezing dawn. Ancient humans did not suddenly become modern thinkers because of fire alone. Many factors shaped human development across immense spans of time. But warmth changed the conditions under which the mind operated. The body slept more deeply. Groups gathered longer after dark. Stories lasted further into the night. Thought itself may have expanded beside stable embers, while winter wind continued outside beyond the edges of firelight. Modern humans live surrounded by warmth controlled almost invisibly. Walls hold steady temperatures through winter nights. Clothing stays dry and lightweight. Fires are replaced by electricity, insulation, and heating systems that respond instantly with little effort. Yet beneath all of this, the human body still carries traces of a much older world. The systems that once helped ancient humans survive freezing nights before reliable fire did not disappear. They remain active quietly inside modern people, responding to cold in ways shaped by countless generations of prehistoric survival. The body still remembers. One of the clearest examples appears the moment cold air touches skin. Blood vessels near the surface narrow automatically, reducing heat loss from extremities. Fingers become pale, toes cool quickly. Warm blood is redirected toward vital organs deeper inside the body. Ancient humans depended on this response constantly during freezing nights. Preserving core temperature mattered more than keeping hands comfortable. Modern people experience the same reaction walking into winter wind for only a few moments. But for prehistoric humans, this process may have continued through entire nights repeatedly across many seasons. Shivering remains another ancient survival system, still deeply embedded in human biology. Muscles contract rapidly to generate heat without conscious control. The body begins burning energy simply to remain warm enough for survival. Even today, severe cold can trigger exhaustion quickly because heat production requires calories. Ancient humans experienced this continuously during periods when fire failed, bedding became wet, or shelter exposed them to wind. Modern discomfort during cold weather may therefore reflect systems originally designed for far harsher conditions than most people now encounter. Sleep also reveals traces of prehistoric adaptation. Humans still sleep more comfortably within certain temperature ranges, and many people instinctively curl inward beneath blankets during cold nights. The body naturally reduces exposed surface area while sleeping, protecting heat near the chest and abdomen. Shared warmth remains calming as well. Parents hold children close during storms. Couples sleep beside one another, partly because body heat creates comfort. Even social behaviors surrounding warmth may contain ancient biological echoes from periods when survival depended directly on sleeping near others. Modern neuroscience and psychology continue finding subtle links between physical warmth and emotional states. Warm environments often reduce stress responses. Heated spaces encourage relaxation. People associate warmth with safety, hospitality, and calmness across many cultures. These associations are complex and influenced by social learning, but they may also reflect deep evolutionary memory. For prehistoric humans, warmth was not luxury, it was survival. A warm body usually meant reduced danger, protected sleep, and another chance to wake after sunrise. Cold signaled exposure and vulnerability. Over immense spans of time, these experiences became woven into human physiology and behavior. The body even reacts emotionally to fire itself in unusual ways. Researchers studying campfires and natural flame observation have noted that watching fire can reduce blood pressure and encourage calm social interaction under certain conditions. Humans remain drawn toward flickering firelight despite living in technological environments far removed from prehistoric caves and shelters. Perhaps part of the mind still recognizes stable flame as one of the oldest signs of nighttime safety. Yet the body's memory of cold appears most clearly when modern comfort disappears unexpectedly. During power outages, winter storms, or nights spent outdoors, ancient instincts return quickly. People gather in groups for warmth. Blankets are layered carefully. Movement increases to generate heat. Sheltered corners become valuable. The nervous system responds automatically in ways remarkably similar to the behaviors that once kept prehistoric humans alive before dependable fire existed. Technology changed human life dramatically, but it did not erase the biology shaped during those earlier struggles. Deep inside modern comfort remains a body designed for a colder world, a body that still tightens muscles against winter wind, still seeks warmth from nearby people, still relaxes beside steady firelight. The ancient cold may be far away now for many humans, but traces of it remain quietly stored beneath the skin, waiting for darkness and falling temperature to remind the body what survival once required. Warmth is one of the few physical sensations that humans describe using emotional language almost everywhere in the world. People speak about warm homes, warm voices, warm memories, and warm personalities. Coldness, by contrast, often becomes associated with distance, silence, or emotional absence. These patterns appear so naturally in human culture that they can seem purely symbolic, but some of them may reach much deeper into human history. For ancient humans, warmth was rarely separate from safety, closeness, and survival. The emotional meaning of warmth may have grown slowly from thousands of generations spent depending on it physically every night. Before reliable fire, warmth usually came from other living bodies. Families slept close together beneath hides and shelter materials because shared heat reduced the risk of dangerous cooling during sleep. Infants survived through physical closeness. Elderly individuals relied on protected sleeping spaces near others. Human touch itself became connected to preserving life. Over immense periods of time, the nervous system may have learned to associate warmth with social security because the two were rarely separated in prehistoric life. To be physically warm often meant being near trusted people inside shelter, while cold darkness remained outside. Modern research in psychology has explored subtle connections between physical warmth and emotional perception. Some experiments suggest that people holding warm objects briefly may describe others as slightly more trustworthy or socially close. Though these effects are modest and complex, scientists continue debating how strong or universal these relationships truly are. Yet even without strong conclusions, it remains difficult to ignore how naturally humans connect warmth with comfort and belonging. Ancient survival may help explain part of this pattern. Fire strengthened these associations further. A stable fire gathered people together physically. Faces became visible, speech slowed, the body relaxed when warmth remained steady through the night. Firelight extended social interaction beyond daylight hours and created enclosed spaces where humans could remain calm together despite the dangerous world outside. Anthropologists studying traditional societies have often observed that evening fires encourage storytelling, cooperation, and emotional bonding. The fire was not only practical technology, it shaped the emotional atmosphere of human nights for thousands of years. Cold environments create the opposite experience. Isolation feels harsher in freezing conditions. A person separated from shelter or warmth becomes vulnerable quickly. Even today, many people experience emotional discomfort more intensely during cold, dark seasons when daylight decreases and outdoor activity becomes limited. Some modern researchers study how temperature, seasonal light changes, and environment affect mood and stress levels, though these effects vary greatly between individuals and cultures. Ancient humans likely experienced environmental emotion far more directly because the line between physical exposure and psychological stress was much thinner. There may also be something important about the predictability of warmth. In prehistoric life, stable heat sources were uncertain for enormous stretches of time. Fires failed, weather changed suddenly, shelter collapsed. A warm, safe night could never be fully guaranteed. When humans finally developed more dependable ways to preserve warmth, the nervous system may have responded with deep relief. Predictable warmth allowed the body to relax more completely because survival no longer depended entirely on constant vigilance. Even today, many people calm themselves instinctively through warmth. Heated blankets, warm drinks, fires, baths, and enclosed sleeping spaces all create feelings of safety difficult to separate from physical sensation itself. Yet modern humans rarely think about why warmth feels emotional. Central heating hides the ancient struggle beneath ordinary comfort. Warmth arrives silently through walls and machines without requiring group cooperation, fire maintenance, or careful shelter preparation. But the body may still respond as though warmth remains precious, because for most of human history it truly was. The emotional power of warmth may therefore come partly from memory older than language, not conscious memory, but biological memory shaped across generations when cold nights threatened survival and warmth meant another sunrise shared beside familiar breathing in the dark. Even now, in quiet winter rooms far removed from prehistoric caves, humans still gather instinctively around heat and one another, as though some ancient part of the mind continues recognizing warmth not simply as comfort, but as safety itself. Modern humans often believe they have escaped the cold completely. Cities glow through winter nights with electric light and controlled heat. Walls seal out wind. Beds remain dry and soft, regardless of weather outside. A person can move through freezing seasons while barely thinking about survival at all. Yet beneath this comfort, the human body and mind still carry ancient expectations shaped long before modern technology existed. The systems that once protected prehistoric humans through dangerous nights continue operating quietly, even inside heated rooms far removed from the world that created them. Modern comfort may hide ancient memory, but it does not erase it. Many everyday behaviors still reflect older survival patterns connected to warmth. People gather instinctively in smaller enclosed spaces during storms or cold weather. Families sleep beneath layers of blankets, even when indoor temperatures remain safe. Warm drinks feel calming after exposure to cold air. Soft lighting and fireplaces create feelings of relaxation difficult to explain purely through practicality. These habits often appear emotional or cultural, but some may descend partly from environments where warmth preservation once determined survival directly. The human nervous system evolved within conditions where losing heat carried real physical danger. Even today, cold exposure affects mood, attention, sleep, and stress responses automatically. Modern architecture itself reflects this ancient relationship with temperature. Humans build insulated walls, layered bedding, heated floors, enclosed sleeping areas, and protected gathering spaces because the body seeks thermal stability naturally. Central heating changed the effort required to obtain warmth, but it did not change the body's preference for protected environments. In many ways, modern homes are highly advanced extensions of the same goals ancient shelters once served. They slow heat loss, block wind, preserve dry sleeping conditions, create safe places where the body can relax without remaining alert to environmental danger constantly. Sleep patterns still reveal prehistoric traces as well. Many people sleep best in cool rooms beneath warm coverings, a balance that mirrors ancient conditions where cold air surrounded bodies protected by hides, bedding, or shared heat. Total exposure feels uncomfortable, yet excessive heat can also disturb sleep because the human body evolved regulating temperature carefully throughout the night. The ancient struggle between warmth and cooling still shapes how modern sleep functions biologically, even if technology now controls the environment more effectively. There is also something revealing about how quickly modern comfort feels fragile when interrupted. During winter blackouts, heating failures, or nights spent outdoors unexpectedly, human behavior changes almost immediately. People gather together, blankets become valuable, movement increases to preserve circulation. Sheltered corners are chosen instinctively. Anxiety rises as temperatures fall. These reactions emerge rapidly because the body still recognizes cold as meaningful. Thousands of years of technology cannot fully remove systems shaped over far longer stretches of evolutionary time. Even emotional memory around warmth continues strongly into the present. Childhood safety is often remembered through warm rooms, blankets, kitchens, sunlight, or the presence of nearby people during cold weather. Winter holidays across many cultures center around shared heat, food, enclosed spaces, and light against darkness. Fireplaces remain emotionally powerful even when no longer necessary for survival. The attraction may not be entirely symbolic. Human beings spent enormous portions of history depending on controlled warmth for physical safety during the most vulnerable hours of the night. Ancient memory may still echo through modern comfort in ways people rarely notice consciously. Yet, perhaps the most remarkable thing is how recently this change truly happened. Reliable indoor heating, insulated homes, and stable nighttime warmth are extremely new compared to the vast timeline of human existence. For most generations that ever lived, cold remained an active force, shaping sleep, migration, shelter, relationships, and fear after sunset. The modern world often feels permanent because people are born inside it, but biologically, humans are still creatures shaped by colder nights than most will ever experience now. Somewhere beneath electric warmth and insulated walls remains a nervous system built beside weak fires, shared breathing, animal hides, and uncertain dawns. The body remembers what the modern world no longer requires it to endure every night. And perhaps that is why warmth still feels deeper than comfort alone. It feels familiar, in a way older than memory itself. For ancient humans, warmth was never simply about comfort, it was time. A warm night meant the body survived long enough to see another sunrise. A dry sleeping place meant energy remained available for hunting the next day. A stable fire meant children, elders, and exhausted adults had a greater chance of waking alive after winter darkness passed. Modern people often think about warmth as a pleasant condition added to life, but for most of human history, warmth was much closer to survival itself. Cold shaped nearly every decision ancient humans made, because the body cannot negotiate with temperature for very long. Hunger can sometimes be endured for days. Exhaustion can be pushed aside temporarily, but severe cold slowly removes the body's ability to think, move, and remain conscious. Ancient humans learned this reality through direct experience over countless generations. A freezing night did not need to kill immediately to become dangerous. Repeated cold weakened muscles, disrupted sleep, reduced hunting ability, increased illness risk, and drained precious energy reserves steadily over time. Warmth, therefore, meant preservation not only of life, but of strength, memory, movement, and social stability. This may explain why so many prehistoric survival strategies eventually centered around controlling heat loss. Animal hides became protection against freezing wind. Shared sleeping conserved body warmth. Shelters blocked moving air. Bedding insulated bodies from frozen ground. Fire transformed darkness into survivable space. Migration followed climates where heat could be retained more easily. Every major adaptation discussed across human prehistory connects in some way to one quiet biological truth. The human body loses warmth constantly, and survival depends on slowing that loss enough to endure the night. Yet warmth also carried meanings beyond biology, even in ancient times. A warm shelter often meant being near trusted people. Families and small groups slept close together because separation increased danger. Firelight gathered humans into shared spaces where communication, memory, and cooperation became easier after dark. In this way, warmth became linked not only to individual survival, but to belonging itself. To remain warm usually meant remaining connected to others. Isolation in prehistoric cold could become deadly very quickly. This relationship between warmth and social closeness may still echo through modern emotional life today. Ancient humans probably did not think of warmth abstractly. They experienced it physically and immediately. The warmth of breath beneath hides, the warmth of stones heated beside fire, the warmth of crowded shelters during storms, the warmth returning painfully to cold hands near embers before dawn. These moments may have shaped human awareness deeply because they interrupted suffering directly. Warmth was relief. It was the slowing of shivering, the loosening of muscles tense from exposure, the brief quieting of fear when fire survived another hour through darkness. Archaeological discoveries reveal many forms of prehistoric adaptation, but they also reveal something simpler beneath them all. Human beings spent enormous portions of history trying to preserve fragile body heat in environments that often worked against them continuously. Survival did not always depend on defeating nature dramatically. Often it depended on very small differences repeated every night. A little less wind, slightly drier bedding, a fire that lasted until dawn instead of dying before midnight, a sheltered valley instead of exposed ground, enough warmth preserved for one more winter. Modern comfort can make prehistoric cold difficult to imagine fully because most people no longer feel its constant pressure directly, yet the human body still carries traces of that older world. The nervous system still relaxes near warmth. Sleep still changes with temperature. Firelight still calms attention in ways electric light often does not. Somewhere beneath modern life remains a species shaped for thousands of years by the effort to remain warm in darkness. Perhaps that is why warmth still feels more meaningful than many other forms of comfort. It was never only about pleasure. For ancient humans, warmth meant the difference between continuing the story of human life and disappearing quietly into the cold long before morning arrived. When people think about inventions that changed human history, they often imagine tools, weapons, agriculture, or machines. But one of the most important transformations may have happened much more quietly. Humans slowly learned how to make the night survivable, not by defeating winter completely, and not through a single discovery, but through thousands of small adjustments repeated across generations. Better shelter placement, better bedding, shared sleeping, more controlled fire, animal hides prepared more carefully, wind blocked more effectively, warmth preserved a little longer each century. These changes did not arrive dramatically, yet together they reshaped human life more deeply than many visible inventions that came later. Before these adaptations, darkness carried severe physical limits. Once temperatures dropped after sunset, human activity narrowed toward immediate survival. Cold reduced movement, weakened concentration, interrupted sleep, and forced constant attention toward preserving body heat. The night belonged mostly to exposure and endurance. But as humans became more skilled at creating stable warmth, the structure of human evenings slowly changed. Shelters remained usable for longer periods after sunset. Firelight extended waking hours. Rest became less fragmented. Groups could remain together through darkness with slightly less fear and exhaustion. In many ways, the quiet invention was not fire alone. It was controlled nighttime survival. Archaeological evidence across many prehistoric regions suggests that humans gradually reorganized living spaces around heat preservation. Hearths appeared repeatedly in central positions. Sleeping areas clustered strategically near warmth. Windbreaks improved. Bedding became more intentional. These changes reveal something important about human adaptation. Ancient people were no longer only reacting to cold moment by moment. They were designing environments that anticipated it before night even arrived. This shift from reaction to preparation may represent one of the earliest forms of long-term environmental control in human history. The body changed its relationship with darkness. Because of this, better warmth allowed longer sleep cycles. Reduced heat loss preserved energy for hunting and migration. Children survived cold seasons more reliably. Older adults could remain part of groups longer. Illness recovery improved when the body no longer spent every night fighting freezing temperatures continuously. Warmth quietly expanded the amount of human life that could happen after sunset and before dawn. Social life changed as well. Stable evening warmth created spaces where people could remain awake together without focusing entirely on immediate survival. Conversations lasted longer. Skills could be practiced beside firelight. Memories and migration knowledge could be shared across generations during quieter nighttime hours. Anthropologists often describe fire as a center of early social development, but fire alone was not enough. What mattered was dependable warmth that allowed the nervous system to relax enough for human attention to move beyond danger temporarily. Thought itself may have expanded inside these warmer nights, yet this transformation remained fragile for most of history. Ancient humans still faced freezing winters, failed fires, collapsing shelters, wet bedding, and dangerous exposure regularly. Warmth required labor every day. Fuel gathering, hide preparation, shelter repair, bedding replacement, and careful movement through seasonal landscapes all continued constantly. The invention was quiet because it never fully removed struggle. It only reduced suffering enough for human life to grow within it gradually. Modern people inherit the result of this long process so completely that it often becomes invisible. Heated homes, insulated clothing, warm beds, and protected sleeping spaces feel normal now. But these comforts represent the final layers of an adaptation that began when ancient humans first learned to slow the escape of body heat during freezing nights. Every blanket, wall, roof, and heater continues a prehistoric project thousands of generations old. Perhaps this is why warmth still changes human behavior so deeply. Warm rooms encourage rest. Firelight slows conversation. Sheltered spaces create calmness almost automatically. Somewhere inside the modern nervous system remains the memory that warmth once transformed the night from a place of danger into a place where human beings could finally recover, speak quietly together, and sleep long enough to dream without waking constantly to the cold. Tonight, somewhere in the modern world, millions of people will fall asleep without thinking about temperature even once. A wall will block the wind automatically. Dry blankets will hold warmth close to the skin. Electricity, or insulated shelter, will quietly maintain conditions stable enough for deep rest. Most people will close their eyes expecting morning to arrive safely. This expectation feels ordinary now. But for most of human history, it was never ordinary at all. Ancient humans lived inside a different relationship with the night. Darkness carried uncertainty because warmth could disappear before dawn, fire could fail, rain could soak bedding. Wind could enter shelters through small openings that slowly drained heat from sleeping bodies hour after hour. Cold was not background discomfort. It was an active force shaping movement, sleep, fear, memory, and survival every single night. Human beings adapted to this world gradually through thousands of small solutions rather than one dramatic discovery. Hides trapped heat, bodies slept together, valleys blocked wind, grass insulated the ground, fire stayed alive a little longer. Shelters became more intentional. Over immense stretches of time, humans learned how to hold warmth close enough to survive until sunrise. Perhaps that is one reason warmth still feels emotionally powerful today. The modern world often treats comfort as convenience, but ancient humans experienced warmth differently. Warmth meant recovery, it meant reduced fear, it meant children sleeping safely through winter darkness. It meant muscles loosening after long exposure to cold wind. It meant another morning became possible. Somewhere beneath modern life, the nervous system may still remember this older meaning quietly. The body still curls inward during cold nights. People still gather around firelight. Warm rooms still create calmness difficult to explain entirely through logic. The ancient relationship between warmth and safety never disappeared completely. It simply became hidden beneath technology. Yet, there is also something easy to forget about ancient survival. Humans did not endure cold because they were fearless or naturally stronger than modern people. They survived because they adapted carefully. They observed the landscape. They learned from repeated failure. They stayed close together. They preserved small advantages wherever they could find them: a slightly warmer shelter, a drier sleeping place, a fire that lasted 1 hour longer before dawn. Human survival often depended not on dramatic victories against nature, but on reducing suffering slowly enough to continue living within it. This may be one of the quiet lessons hidden inside prehistoric nights. Much of human history was shaped not by conquest, but by persistence, not by perfect safety, but by fragile warmth protected carefully from darkness and wind. Modern people inherit the results of those countless unnoticed efforts every time they sleep comfortably through winter weather without fear. The insulated room, the heated blanket, the calm expectation of uninterrupted rest all belong to a story that began long before written memory. A story carried through caves, storms, migrations, fading fires, and cold landscapes where survival once depended on preserving body heat through one more night. And perhaps the strangest part is this: the cold that shaped humanity so deeply is now mostly invisible to many people. Technology has pushed it outside walls and windows until it becomes weather rather than immediate danger. Yet the body still reacts when warmth disappears unexpectedly. Anxiety rises during power outages. People move closer together during storms. Firelight still feels calming in ways difficult to fully describe. The ancient world has not vanished entirely. Traces of it remain inside modern humans, waiting quietly beneath ordinary comfort. So as the night grows quieter and warmth settles gently across the room, it is worth wondering about something ancient people may never have fully answered either. After thousands of years spent learning how to survive the cold, did humans truly conquer the night, or did we simply become better at forgetting how close it once lived beside us?